Then we will officially get started. Welcome everybody to another episode of Clear Vision Wednesday. I'm your host, Claudia Mühlenweg. I'm the creator of the Natural Clear Vision Method and the founder of the Natural Clear Vision Institute. And today we have a very interesting topic, which is dear to my heart. We will talk about the shared root causes of anxiety and blurry vision. A lot of times people just think it's genetic or aging or there is nothing else involved. And I have a special guest, and let me bring her on today. Well, give me 1 second. It's always these things popping up. Welcome, Dr. Traci Potterf.
Hello, Claudia.
Super happy to have you here. And so, I can read your bio. You work with functional medicine. You have a PhD from UC Berkeley. You have all these credentials. But why don't you instead tell us a little bit, how did you get interested in anxiety and the connection to vision and blurry vision?
Yes, I'm happy to share that. So something interesting about my background, I meandered into functional medicine in a very nonlinear way, which kind of magically set me up perfectly, but it's nothing I could have predicted, right? And when I was a kid, well, my dad was a psychiatrist. And so when I was a kid, I would help out in his office. And so back then they would just say if you had anxiety, that it was a genetic, like all mental health issues, it's a genetic chemical imbalance. Here, take this medication, maybe some talk therapy. And that was it, And what that implied was that you're defective or broken. There's something wrong with you if you have this issue, right? And then when I was 19, I had my first panic attack and I was like, am I defective or broken? Am I destined to have this thing for the rest of my life? I'm a highly sensitive person, didn't know what that was back then, meds just don't work for me. I definitely don't judge other people for using them. I just want people to know the risks and benefits and to think of them as maybe something temporary to get your head above water, but to go deeper and find the underlying causes so you can fix it and not have to live with this the rest of your life. I'm trying to get rid of the notion that all these mental health issues are just purely genetic and, something's wrong with you. And my vision around, no pun intended, but my vision around mental health and physical health, and eventually I would get more interested in eye health, and I'll tell you why in a minute, changed when my first career before functional medicine was as a medical anthropologist. And so one of the things I was really interested in is how all these different cultures, especially hunter-gatherer cultures, they would have amazing vision, amazing teeth. They wouldn't have cardiovascular disease or cancer. Their blood sugar was good. Their body mass was good. They were fit and good fertility, all this stuff. And then all of a sudden they would start drinking Coca-Cola or start eating a lot of processed food. And maybe like loggers would come in and, contaminate, or people would start spraying pesticides or whatever the thing was. And they would start getting all these chemical exposures. And then between their adopting the industrialized lifestyle and being exposed to all these environmental toxins, they started developing the same degenerative diseases and the same mental health problems, the depression, the anxiety, goes on and on and on, right? And so I realized this isn't a genetic defect. This is a cultural problem, and it's an environmental problem. And so fast forward, long story short, I ended up with some health stuff. My mom had Crohn's disease, and I was able to use my intuition, what I'd learned in medical anthropology, in terms of thinking in terms of lifestyle. And this is before I even knew what functional medicine was, before it became like really hip and well-known and whatever. I mean, there was barely the internet at that time. And so I was looking in books and so and online journals and magazines, whatever. So anyway, what eventually happened is my mom got Crohn's disease, and I was able to help figure out how to get her in remission. And they said her colon had to come out. And so we were able to save her colon. She's been off any kind of immunosuppressant drug since 2004. She's been quiescent, kept her colon, never had a relapse, because we took a lifestyle approach. And there was like 1 or 2 supplements we used, but we did almost everything with lifestyle and also mental health component too, right? Okay, so now fast forward again. And so I had managed to recover from my anxiety. And so I had trauma. My father, he was a psychiatrist, but he had unresolved trauma he never dealt with. He had severe PTSD, was severely abused as a child, severely neglected, had malnutrition, all kinds of stuff. So anyway, so I had overcome lifestyle-induced anxiety and done a lot of work on trauma from my childhood. So I was meditating 2 hours a day, eating this amazing diet and exercising and circadian rhythm. I was doing all the things, right? And I would wake up in the morning and just be like, oh, like just total panic. And I was living in this house and I knew I lived in Hawaii at the time and there was so much humidity. So I knew there was mold. I'd gone into a home multiple times that had horrible black mold and I would go home and throw up. And so that's actually what helped the family figure out why they'd been so sick. And so I ended up realizing I developed a really strong sensitivity to mold. I do have some genetic markers for that, plus the exposure. And so then what ended up happening was the new house I moved into, I got exposed in someone else's house. It hypersensitized me. And then I moved into a house very close to the ocean, beautiful view, but it was killing me, not only because there's toxic mold, but the paint started peeling off the walls. And for some reason, even though I tend to be very aware of environmental toxins, it didn't compute that level of peeling paint for that many years that they wouldn't fix, the landlords wouldn't fix, gave me lead poisoning. So now I had toxic mold, lead poisoning, and then I had a partner with Lyme disease and helped him get diagnosed. But then because I was so immunosuppressed by these toxins, I ended up also developing Borrelia burgdorferi, so Lyme, right? So here I am with Lyme, mold, and lead poisoning. And what was happening? One of the first symptoms was anxiety. As it progressed, one of the second symptoms was my vision started going really blurry. And I started seeing all kinds of flashers and sparks. And it was like I remember one 4th of July, literally, there were fireworks outside, but literally what was going off in my visual field was so intense, it felt like fireworks in my brain. And so, and then I went to an ophthalmologist just to get my eyesight tested, and they're like, oh, this is just age. And I was so mad. I was like, how can you say this? This happened so quickly and in alignment with the increasing symptoms from the exposure. And then so one thing I always want to make clear to people that if you're ever dealing with trying to detoxify metals or mold, you have to be very gentle. And the more rattled your nervous system and immune system are, the more gentle you need to be. But I committed an error I know better than to do, which was like, I want chelation, get it out of me. And that and sicker. And that really set off my vision. So as these heavy metals were being pulled out of my tissues, my vision, I was scared I was going to lose my vision. It got so bad. I could barely see. So what ended up happening is I went back to the slow and gentle approach, did a lot of nervous system work, kept taking care of myself, was able to gradually remove this toxicity, heal the Lyme. And what ended up happening was, even though my vision, I'm not going to say it's exactly how it was before, because it's not. And I'm still really open to Claudia's work. And I love the Bates, and I need to do more of what she's teaching. So I just, like, if you're really into her work and like, let's do it for real, but my vision is so much better. It's made a huge improvement since I dealt with these underlying toxic exposures. So there are nutritional reasons, like I need to let you talk, but I'm really interested still to this day, and now newer data on how hunter-gatherers, that used to be, there's some older data showing that hunter-gatherers had this amazing visual acuity into old age. And then there are follow-up studies showing that actually they're starting to develop myopia and a lot of the same kind of, visual issues, blurred vision, that as they're starting to industrialize a little more. They still have a little better vision, but the difference in visual acuity is becoming less remarkable as they change their lifestyle.
So, that's a super fascinating story. You've gone through so much, and what you shared about the ophthalmologist, I think it's just very common that we either hear it's genetic or it's aging. That's like the number two things that we, genetic or aging or both. So how did you at that point connect the dots? Like, how did you, while you were in this healing, how did you realize that your vision, like, did you end up getting glasses? Did you do so? Like, what did you end up doing? Because you have this problem of blurry vision, you could barely see, right? Which is like, makes your life basically very challenging. What were your next steps, or how did you realize that's connected to the anxiety and all the other challenges that you had?
Good question. So first, one thing that was important is I had a business partner for years. He's still one of my best friends. And he had worked with a Bates method coach. And so he had taught me a lot of stuff. And I was like, oh, and I was concerned that if I started wearing glasses, I was actually going to weaken my eyes and make them strain more and cause degeneration. So I did a deep dive into PubMed and just did a lot of research and started getting into the nitty-gritty of each of these underlying causes and their impact on vision. So it's interesting because for so long, chronic Lyme was, or chronic, now we say tick-borne illness because it's not just the Lyme spirochetes, it's different, Bartonella, Babesia, Mycoplasma, blah, 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 the tick-borne critters, And so I started looking at tick-borne illness and the influence, how it affects vision. And it's cool because for a long time I think there's a lot of, whether it's intentional or unintentional medical gaslighting that's like, oh, that's not real, and so many people have been through chronic illness where they're like, your labs look fine because the things we're testing are fine, but you're still like literally dying or sick or miserable, or, some people even get suicidal. And so, I started seeing that even Johns Hopkins University was writing articles about how vision's affected by Lyme, right? And so, there's a lot of, I mean, not a lot, but if you dig in, you can find information on lead poisoning and how it affects the vision. And there's so many parts of the eye, and I'm sure you've had so many guests break down the eyes and vision and whatever. But the eyes are the only part of the brain we can see on the outside, right? So whenever we're looking at eyeballs, we're looking at brains, and so our eyes are they're our nervous system. Our brain and nervous system encompasses our eyesight. So anything that is a neurotoxin, meaning it's a poison to the brain and nervous system, is going to be a poison to your eyes. And there's so many things. So there are environmental toxins. So heavy metals have a huge impact on vision. They can cause migraines, anxiety, panic attacks, all kinds of stuff. There's, there are all these different infections, not just Lyme, but, there are all different kinds of parasites, not just parasites that physically get into your eyes, because that's a thing, but just the damage they do in terms of gut damage, malabsorption of nutrients. So now you don't have the nutrients you need for good vision. That's a whole other thing, is nutrition. And, then, and then just the inflammatory situation. So like, if you're familiar with functional medicine principles, that when you have inflammation in the gut and dysbiosis, imbalances in your microbial ecosystem and your microbiome, you're going to have inflammation in your brain. You're probably going to have a compromised blood-brain barrier. So toxins are going to get into your brain. They're going to affect you. So your eye tissues can be physically damaged, like the actual eyeball itself can affect the vitreous fluid, the retina, every part, the sclera, like every part of the eyes can be damaged by toxins and anything that causes cellular inflammation, because you're made of cells and your eyes are made of cells. And then that can also affect your brain. The different optic centers of the brain can be affected if you have an inflammatory condition in the brain. So often, one of the things I want people to understand about anxiety, it is not a disorder, it's a symptom. Depression too, like fatigue, like headaches, like rashes, like nausea. These are all symptoms. It's nature's intelligent way of letting us know something is wrong. Just the same way if you put your hand on something hot, like your body's like, don't do that, right? And so our brains, the way they say ouch is with anxiety. They say ouch with depression, with fatigue, with brain fog. But another way your brain says ouch is with blurry vision and visual issues.
I love that. I always say blurry vision is the engine light coming on, right? Because people get it when the engine light comes, right? We don't keep driving. We just pull over or go to the mechanic and get a diagnosis.
Oh, but yeah.
It's also interesting that you talked about that you already knew the Bates method, because while functional medicine is amazing, I'm actually working with a functional medicine doctor myself, to optimize my health. And they look at labs different, they do different labs, and they actually look at root causes. I still find a huge blind spot with vision, and that's why I actually get a talk. Mine shares some of the biggest blind spot in holistic health, because everybody sits there with their glasses and, so you have the advantage, I would say, already knowing about the Bates method, already hearing about that idea that vision is also one of the symptoms and that we can do something about it in addition to the functional medicine approach, right? So would you say that was a factor of you like not going down the rabbit hole of just getting glasses and then just doing,
right.
And kind of the eyes are somehow different than everything else in the body and the brain, right? It's so
no sense. Yeah, it's like dental health too, right? It's like
Right.
vision and dental health. It's like people, it's like it's disconnected from the rest of the body. And that's
Mhm.
ridiculous. And yeah, and you're right. In functional medicine, even, there's so much work on, the gut and the brain and the liver and the kidneys and the da 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 and cell membranes and mitochondria and all this stuff. But what about these things? And I have to say, there's a dual causal relationship with blurred vision and anxiety. One is that blurred vision and anxiety share underlying causes: neurotoxicity, neuroinflammation, being poisoned, also being malnourished, and also blood sugar issues. We know that people with diabetes, what are you at risk of, right? You know? And so, but also when you have blood sugar issues, it causes anxiety. That's one of the causes of anxiety people don't realize, that blood sugar issues. And so they share so many underlying causes because it's all the nervous system, the brain and nervous system, it's all connected, right? But then the second causal relationship is the literal back and forth cause of anxiety, being in a state of chronic anxiety because of the stress hormones, the adrenaline, all the, it actually creates functional changes to eyesight and to the part of the brain that interprets vision and creates that creates the visual experience, but also the eye tissue itself. And also just the tension of muscles around the eyes and all that stuff, like, the not blinking as much, the lack of lubrication in the eyes when we're stressed out or staring at a screen or whatever. And so anxiety itself, just being in a state of perpetual anxiety, I could go, I don't want to overwhelm people, but there are so many connections. It's just infinite connections. And so there's like, we can talk about stress hormones, muscle tension, like, fluids and lubrication, things like that. But there's also, when we're stressed out, we don't absorb nutrients as well. So we don't have as good of gut function. It's harder to detoxify. It screws up our hormones. Hormone imbalances can contribute to visual issues. That's a lot of, the midlife aging crisis that can happen, and so there, being in a state of perpetual stress. That's why I think it's genius that the Bates method and a lot of other people I've heard talk about visual, correcting their vision, it, really comes back to presence practices, to meditation, to breath work, to being in the moment, to pleasure, to play, to having fun, and we have this culture that shames pleasure. Like, we want it so bad, but then we're so bad if we do it. And the problem is that we've fetishized destructive pleasures. We've fetishized alcohol, sugar, all these different things that like aren't really, they're destructive to us. They actually poison our brain and nervous system. They damage our eyesight, among other things, and they cause mental health problems. Yet you watch a TV show and someone's like, I had a bad day. I went through a breakup. My heart is broken. I need a drink. I need a drink. I need a drink. And they're not talking about like an herbal tea. They're like, I'm going to put a hepatotoxin, a liver toxin, and a brain toxin into my body so I will briefly feel relaxed, but then it will do damage to my organ systems that tomorrow and the next day and the next day, I'm actually going to be more depressed and more anxious. And then I'm going to be in a worse situation than I was today. Am I saying you should never drink alcohol? No, that's not what I'm trying to say. I'm just saying be aware of what you're doing. Like, for me, if I feel super healthy and vibrant and I have some life force to give away, then I might have an amazing glass of wine or, some really good mezcal or something like that. But it's just rare. And I never do it to fill a void. I never do it because I'm in emotional pain and I'm trying to self-medicate because I know it's a poison. It's kind of a fun poison. And so your body has to be able to recover from the fun poison. So I kind of went off on a tangent there,
Yeah,
but
no,
but
that's,
but the
I
nervous
mean,
system is such an important part. Oh, and then also losing your vision. When your world starts going blurry, there's anxiety. It causes anxiety. When you suddenly aren't able to see, that causes anxiety. So then you're in this loop. And we all have a mix of all of this, right? We all have maybe some nutritional imbalances, some gut issues, some toxic exposures. Maybe we have some little infections we don't know about. And then we're under stress, and then we have negative thoughts, and then we have traumas, and then, and all that stuff by its powers combined can really have an effect on our vision. So like you said, it is like a check engine light, you know?
yeah, I mean, people misunderstand the Bates method. They always say it's eye exercise, and it couldn't be farther from the truth because it is really based on relaxation. Now, relaxation sounds so, oh, it's just relaxation. But relaxation exactly is not that glass of wine, which is a coping mechanism that actually poisons you, just like you said. So, and when I work in my programs, it's always about, I would talk about relaxation of body. I do, for instance, my fascia release, breath work, all those things. And then from the top down, releasing stress in the brain, in the mind, and in the eyes, because the muscles are usually way too tense. Our eye muscles are 400 times stronger than they need to be. And in very few cases, the muscles don't have to be strengthened. Like, it's not like, I exercise like gym, So thank you for pointing out all these different connections. And I don't know if you found this, because obviously you're not working with vision primarily, but I found a connection to anxiety. First of all, it's a vicious cycle. You said your vision gets blurry, then you get more anxious, and you get more worried. But that's also this connection of nearsightedness and anxiety versus I found more with farsightedness. I found more in anger. There's more of like a pushing out, like get away from me, like pushing out. Versus nearsightedness, there's more this anxiety feeling. There's more fear involved, generally speaking. So have you found that too? I don't know if you know, because maybe you haven't really paid attention to that. So
so you know more about this than I do. So I have noticed that. I do know that I lean right now. I haven't fully corrected my vision, so have more trouble with up close, and my
would be farsighted.
Very farsighted. I can see way into the distance perfectly, but I pick up a supplement bottle with tiny little print, and I used to be able to read it, and I'm like,
Well, let's work. I can help you with that.
I would love that.
So I think it's really important for people to understand all the different factors that you mentioned, but at the end of the day, the being in the relaxed and, like you said, joy and fun, because if we're not even interested in things that we're looking at, right? Our brain is always based on being interested. Yes. We're looking at things that we think we should be looking at. I like the word fetishize work and, being busy and always being on screens. And anyway, I'm not sure where I'm going with all of this, but I think it's really important.
Curiosity, exploration, right?
Yeah.
Like, and that's one of the things about hunter-gatherers. So I sometimes, I love to read scientific studies, but sometimes they're so myopic, ha ha ha. And so they're very just like, well, maybe it's this one thing that's causing these hunter-gatherers. I'm like, no, this is a whole way of life. They're eating real food. They're eating, they're eating a variety of different, plants, animals, internal organs. They're out in the sunshine, they're outside. Sunlight's super important for vision. I'm not staring directly at the sun, obviously. Circadian rhythms play a huge role in hormone balance and vision and mental health and sleep and all this stuff, and then they're out moving in an environment that we evolved to live in, where they're seeing trees and roots and rocks and bugs and birds, and they're hearing things, and all these, there's just this like symphony of reality that's creating an environment where they're naturally looking around. If you're gathering, you're looking up and down and around, and like, isn't that an important thing, the Bates method, to just kind of look around a lot?
Well, it's not so mechanical. I'm always saying moving your attention. So you want to be drawn to where your attention is, what you're interested in. And there's a question about an exercise I did in my free 5-day training called a hot dog, where you see like, So, and then somebody said the eye muscles, or sometimes, when we make changes, things feel worse initially because we realize, something has been awakened that was really stiff before, and now we kind of getting our joints moving. I haven't, let's say I haven't been doing yoga for like a while, and then I do my first down dog and everything feels kind of stiff and achy, and maybe I even get sore. Yeah. So I think that's really normal that once we awaken. Another thing, I don't know about how interested that is for you, but the Bates method, a lot of it is what he called memory and imagination. So as you said, the eyes are part of the brain. The retina is actually part of the brain. And I always say we do not see with the retina, right? We see with the visual cortex. We interpret data based on what we get. Like the eyes are light receivers, and then that gets turned into an electrical signal and goes to the optic nerve to the brain, right? And that's really where we see. That's why people can disagree completely over talking about the same thing, because their perception is based on memory, and that's where you have, your adverse childhood events, where you have all these other things coming into play that have nothing to do with the objective thing that you're looking at. Exactly. So
yeah, and how our brains can filter in and out things, or I like to say, you hear what you fear, because often if we're like, I'm afraid this person's going to reject me, then they'll say something, and then we'll be like, oh, we'll breathe that meaning into it. Well, we do that visually too, is we'll filter things out, and we'll look around and not see things that were right there. I mean, how many times have you been looking for something and then you went back and realized you had looked like 5 times and you literally, your brain couldn't see it, you know? So yeah, we see in our brains, and our brains are pretty biased, you know, and it's an adaptive survival strategy, right? To take past experience, use it to like, you know, move forward, right?
I mean, the question now, I mean, I don't see any. If you guys on YouTube, if you have any questions, welcome everybody on YouTube. Let me know and I can ask Dr. Traci the questions if you have any specific questions. But my question would be like, let's say somebody has symptoms of anxiety or blurry vision, or like what would be the next best step for them? Because I feel like, you know, and I'll give you an example. One of my daughters is actually struggling with anxiety, right? And she also happens to be the one with vision problems. So, but it's like a lot of times, you know, when you're like in your 20s, and I feel like there's a huge increase in anxiety and nearsightedness overall, and you know, and but a lot of times in your early 20s, you don't really, you're maybe a student, you know, you're in college, you don't always have money to look for a functional medicine doctor. So I'm not, but like, what are things that people can do that recognize or believe, understand that this is not just, like you said, genetics or some kind of brain chemistry problem? What can people do, and how can you help someone that struggles with this?
Yeah, that's a good question. So, you know, I was listening to an interview about weight loss. I have a reason I'm bringing this up. And there was this whole discussion about how, you know, people will say, oh, well, is it insulin? Is it leptin? Is it, you know, is it genetic? Is it environmental toxins? Is it trauma? Is it stress? And the answer is yes. It's all of it, right? So same thing with anything, whether it's vision or anxiety, depression, anything you're dealing with, autoimmunity, Lyme disease, mold, whatever, it's multi-layered. And so, you know, we use a lot, I think a lot of practitioners, and even in mental health, like therapists and, you know, functional medicine practitioners, we use this metaphor of, well, there's a term called allostatic load. And that's just a nerdy word for how much crap your body can put up with. Things start falling apart, you know? And so in an industrialized culture, allostatic load tends to run very high because we've normalized a toxic culture that tries to override nature, and we're not living in alignment with our evolutionary biology. So that's why we're getting so mentally and physically ill. And so if we try to look for one magic bullet or pill to fix the problem, it's the equivalent of your house is on fire, your smoke alarm goes off, you take the battery out of the smoke alarm and you think that'll put out the fire, and your house burns down. So when you get that check engine light of blurry vision, of anxiety, something's off in your physiology. And so I teach people top down, bottom up. I heard you say top down. So I think a lot of us have, you think you have an original idea and you find out everyone else has the same original idea. So the top down is like working with how your consciousness shapes your physiology. So that's going to be your meditation, your breathing, your breath work, and to find kinds of breath work, and I'll tell you about one in a minute, that actually have intrinsic pleasure, that it feels so good to do it. It gives you a natural high, and it brings you so much peace and joy and pleasure and feeling good in your body that you just want to do it regularly because it brings you pleasure. I'm really big on pleasure. I call it healthy hedonism, where we choose healing and uplifting pleasures to fill our lives and crowd out the destructive pleasures. So we have a culture that teaches us destructive pleasures, which is silly because there's so many more pleasures that actually heal us and make us happy and feel wonderful joy and give the body the ability to heal. So the top down, finding ways of doing meditation and breathing with intrinsic pleasure that make you feel good. I call them healthy ways to get high. And then working on, your thoughts and how you see the world, the more cognitive stuff. And I also am really big on mental rehearsals or visualizations, whatever you want to call them, where you're focusing more on what you want than what you don't want. You're focusing on what you want to create. Now, you do need to be with pain and feel your way free. You can't just suppress your way free. You have to feel your way free. You have to deal with your emotions, right? So that's like more the top down, but the bottom up is going to be actually more feeling your body, the somatic work, restoring the functionality. This is the functional medicine because we're restoring function, restoring the functionality of your internal organs, of your digestive function, your liver, you're doing physical things for your eyes, moving your body, nourishing yourself. So if we don't do the top down and the bottom up, we don't get better. So that's why I offer people, I have, 3 pillars. One is going to be the nervous system rewiring or retraining, because of neuroplasticity, we can actually restructure our brains and change those habits. But even if you do that and you're not taking care of yourself, you're not sleeping, you're not eating well, you're malnourished, you're not gonna heal, right? So you have to do, then there's I call it a lifestyle makeover, because who doesn't love a good makeover? It has to be,
Yeah.
it's not fun. You're not going to stick with it. Willpower is the worst. Like, it never works. So, and then the third pillar is going to be the functional medicine work. This is the labs, the advanced functional labs, where you can look at different aspects of your physiology and figure out what in your biology is driving the anxiety. And so I have a natural anxiety solutions program, and every single person who's gone through this program has resolved their anxiety. And these are people, some of them they feel like they were born with it. They don't remember ever not having it. They have mental health issues in their family. They were convinced it was genetic. They were convinced it was just something who they were. And now they're adults, and they're just like, wow, I don't have anxiety anymore. This is like, whoa, this is cool. So I want people to know you're not defective, you're not broken, you're not hopeless. Even if people in your family have it, even if you've had it for decades or your whole life, you can heal your anxiety. And a lot of young people, I had the worst anxiety in my 20s. So I really feel for your daughter. So, but when you say the first step, so I just laid out a giant roadmap that can seem really overwhelming, which is why there are people who guide you through things, because you do it one step at a time and make it fun and have support, because we're tribal creatures. We're meant to be in tribe. We're meant to be in community. We're meant to have support, not have to figure things out by ourselves. That's not natural. That's anxiety inducing. But if I wanted to give you just one first step, people normally are like, tell me what to eat, which is important. But if your nervous system is really dysregulated and you're not really in your body, you're not going to make good food choices. You're not even going to have the mindset to even invest in doing the functional medicine work. Like, you're not going to have the wherewithal to be solutions oriented, to figure your way, navigate your way through that. So I really want people to start with some really simple nervous system work. And I have on my website, I'm about to switch over to, I'm developing this quiz to help people understand what their anxiety code is, because there are different kinds of anxiety. It's not all the same. So I'm developing a little free mini course for that, and a quiz, and I'm really excited about it. But people are still going to get this free gift, but it's up there now. So I call it a magic brain trick meditation, because this is neuroscience based. It was a technique developed by Peter Levine and Maggie Phillips, both PhD trauma experts. And it was originally developed to help people with pain, with physical pain. But what I discovered, and I put my own spin on it, because I teach meditation and things like that also, and breath work. So I put my own spin on this, and it's a 15-minute meditation. It gets you in your body, and it's something you do with your awareness that actually not only helps with physical pain, but it actually downregulates anxiety and creates endorphins, releases endorphins, and helps you feel peace. Some people get really high doing it, and some people at least just feel a whole lot better. And then I accidentally discovered that there are people that I had clients discover that who had insomnia, they discovered that when they did this at night, it would help them fall asleep or go back to sleep. So I've gotten a lot of feedback that this is really amazing for sleep. So it's a 15-minute practice you can memorize. You download the audio, do it for a week. You'll have it memorized. You'll know how to do it. It's a simple technique. And then it has cumulative effects on your nervous system. And so then when you're back in your body, you're calmer, and you're experiencing your self-healing superpowers, you're realizing I have more control over how I feel than I realized, because anxiety feels out of control. And so when you start learning you can have more control over your nervous system, it's empowering. And then you're like, what else can I do? And then maybe that's when you bring in the nutrition and some of the other pieces of the puzzle. So that was a very long answer to your question.
Okay. This is brilliant. So your website and everything is linked under the video. So I'm definitely going to download this and check it out. And it's amazing. I mean, we know each other a little bit, but I had no idea how much overlap is in both of our approaches. It's very much perfectly aligned, like almost yin yang, like perfectly same model of how we start doing things step by step with nervous system regulation and all those things. That's amazing. So somebody was asking the breath technique. You said something a little earlier about like the breathing technique. Is that part of the 15 minutes, or is that something?
So that one, I do have a little bit of breathing in that. That's more of a brain. That's something you do with your focus. Not necessarily, well, it's not your visual focus, it's your sensory focus. And then some of the breathwork stuff, I teach it in my program, but I can give you a couple of, there's some that are very easy that you could just look.
Give us maybe like really easy ones.
Yeah. So there's one that's been around for a long time. I actually learned this. I taught yoga on the side for years, because
oh my God.
I balanced out Dr. Traci. It's like, I'm Dr. Traci. And then I would just get to go be a yoga teacher. I love yoga. I'm a huge yoga fan, big. And yeah, I've had meditation teachers and done a lot of work with that too. So, but something that I learned a long time ago before now it's super popular, which is the physiological sigh. I think a lot of you probably heard about it right now, but it really is effective it's just, I think for people who are overwhelmed, who are like, I have too much to do, I don't have time for anything. And you can just do 5 minutes of a physiological sigh in the morning. That will start to change your brain. And it also becomes like a little wedgie placeholder for having a practice first thing in the morning. Then you can expand it out and, spend 15 minutes and maybe you do different breath work. There's a kind of breath I should just make I have videos of this. I just haven't really, they're in my program and I haven't put them out on YouTube or whatever, but there's a kind of breathing called Humsa breathing, but it's very similar to just, gosh, do you know what it's called? The one, the just kind of plain one they're researching in universities is where you go, it's like holotropic breathing kind of thing.
Yeah, is it no, I know the one where you do like 2 inhales really quickly.
Okay, yeah, that's physiological sigh. So physiological sigh is like, I'm kind of stopped up. And I like to slow it down because some people, if you do it fast, you're going to get kind of woozy, which can be kind of fun,
right.
But if that makes you nervous or feel unsafe, if you can do it really slow, like you can do it with your eyes closed, or you can do it like I like to do it outside when weather permitting. And I like to like look around and I like to see the bees and I like to see the plants and the leaves and the dirt and so I do something I call a magical morning sunshine ritual. And I go outside, I find, like on the grass, if you're able to find something not sprayed with a bunch of toxic chemicals and like get the soles of your feet on the earth. And I'll even do it if it's cold. I might bundle up and just put my bare feet on the earth. But then if it's snowing, then I'm not gonna,
Yeah.
not that hardcore yet. But anyway, but you put your feet on the earth and it's ideal if you can get some sun on you. I'm very fair, but I just go in the sun when I'm not going to get burned. And, so that way you go out in the morning, first thing as early as you can and, get some sunlight on your skin, in your eyes, get your feet on the ground, and then do about 5 minutes of breath work. So I like my Humsa breathing. It goes like this. It goes, so it's 30 of those. And then you go, and you hold your breath. And then it's going to make you like, woo, like you have to know you're safe. Like, and you ride this wave. See, I already got a little woozy doing it, but I like the feeling. And it just makes you free. It makes you release everything you're trying to hold on to, struggle, like just kind of erases the etch a sketch of your brain. And you just go into this kind of floaty feeling. And then you can release your breath and sit there and just kind of call it basking in the glory. And then you do 2 more rounds. And then that takes about 5 minutes. And then I do about 15 minutes of just breathing and feeling. I'll do, if you guys know Ujjayi breath, if you've gone to yoga class, where it's like that little contraction back your throat. And so I'll close my eyes. I'll focus on my third eye, just kind of visually in that part of the visual field. And I'll do Ujjayi breath. And then I'll just feel my body. I'll just be breathing and feeling with that kind of visual focus. And then the last 5 minutes, I'll do a little visualization of whatever's coming up for me. I'll either, if I have a strong emotion, I'll just feel my way through it until I'll feel it and release it. Or if I'm trying to make a change in my life, then I will just do a really vivid fantasy visualization of what I'm trying to create. Sometimes it's very symbolic and fanciful, and sometimes it's very concrete. And I just let my brain be creative. Like I let my brain just kind of meander and do its thing, because we need a balance between being like super like focused and driven or whatever, and then being completely unplugged and meandering and whatever. Our brain needs these different modes to be balanced. And if we do all one or all the other, we end up out of whack, but there's like
really fantastic. I would Humsa, and
oh,
then when I usually do
yeah, huh?
when I meditate, I usually do the palming where I close my eyes, and then
awesome. Yeah,
that is good to do with the Ujjayi breath too, where you like, so I get the sunlight first, and then depending on the time of the year, right? If I usually get up really early, and if it's so dark, then I might do other palming first, and then later I do some sunning. But I love that breath. I think that's something I'm going to try too. I've done breath work too, where you do get really high.
Yeah.
You feel it really good. Your whole body is vibrating. It's just amazing. There's so many ways of using breath in such a powerful way. So,
And if that, yeah. And if that's too much, you can just do like alternate nostril breathing. You can look that up on the internet. So there's alternate nostril, physiological sigh. Those are really good ones to start with. And then if you want to get more into like the hum saw breathing, I learned about that way before the whole Wim Hof thing. And the Wim Hof breathing, I've never heard Wim Hof like talk about it, but it's modeled after Tibetan breathing. It's what monks would use to go out in the cold. They'd have these wet robes and go out in the snow, and they would do this breathing to heat themselves up or whatever. And so, I'm curious if he's ever given a nod to that. And then, yeah, I feel like I'm missing something. Oh, there's breath of fire. So
yeah.
before hum saw, sometimes people like the breath of fire where you're going, and then you can do breath holds with that where you go, you inhale, hold, or you can exhale, hold. So anytime you do a breath hold, that's something called a hormetic stressor, hormesis. To me, that sounds like a Dr. Seuss character. But anyway, so a hormetic stressor is a beneficial stressor that builds resilience, like a healthy sunshine exposure without burning, getting exposed to plant compounds, different microbes, exercise, sunshine, all these different, I already said sun, but these are all hormetic stressors, breath holds, there's being exposed to cold, being exposed to heat. By the way, being cold exposure and cold water was a game changer for healing my nervous system. And it actually helped my vision. So like getting in either a cold river, cold showers, or if you want to do an ice bath or whatever, or just a tub full of real cold water. That was it. And then also sauna. So heat and cold, that built so much resilience, cellular resilience, that helped me heal faster. So
It's super, super helpful. I put the website again in the comments on YouTube so that I think we kind of rounded it up. You gave so many helpful tips and just simple things. And, like even just picking one of the breath practices and starting from there and getting obviously the help of somebody like you, Dr. Traci, some kind of functional medicine doctor, somebody who can guide you step by step. Because before we went live, we talk about, I tried things on my own, on my vision, on my other health. And don't just fall into that's just my belief, at least. I don't know what your thoughts are, but when you see these things on Instagram, everybody should eat this, everybody should do this, everybody should, I'm always, there might be popular posts, but I'm staying away from this because we're all different, and working with somebody that can actually help you be like the anxiety detective that you are, right? And you're like really figuring out what is the thing that you need to get started with versus doing this cookie cutter approach, because it really doesn't work that way.
Yeah, we're not cookies, we're real humans.
Yes, I love that. We're not cookies. Well, thank you so much. This was really great. And, can share again really quick where people, I put your website there already, but what's the best way to connect with you if anybody wants to download your thing on the website, but then also.
If you want to go to my website, you can download the thing, you can get on my newsletter. You can follow me on Instagram. I'm starting to get going. I'm really inspired by Claudia, to really get going on YouTube and do more educational videos on YouTube. I've been so busy with my practice. And also I went through a healing crisis. So I'm picking back up, and now I'm a woman on a mission, and I want to really revolutionize how we're dealing with the mental health crisis and its connection to the chronic illness crisis, and this whole myth that aging has to be this completely destructive, miserable process, and that we're all victims of our genetics and that we have no power over our lives. So I love the work you're doing. I'm so excited. I'm definitely going to send people your way. This is so, losing your vision. It was terrifying to get to the point where I could barely see and function. And it was terrifying. And, and that you're out there, you're filling that gap in the world, that I get why you've blown up and are getting so popular, and you need to get more popular, because what you're offering people is a game changer. It's life changing. And so thank you for doing what you do.
Well, thank you for doing what you're doing, because a lot of times I have to send, my clients to you, for instance, because, what I'm doing is only, not only it's life changing, but however, there is always more to do. And that's the things that at some point I thought, I have to study all these things. I'm like, no. I'm going to focus on what I do best. And then I send somebody with, anxiety, bigger anxiety challenges to you so that you can help them, because what you're doing is also really amazing. And especially with your background in all this research, because you're really good at researching and connecting the dots, right? Which is super important. I think a lot of medical doctors, I know you're not a medical doctor, but they're not really learning that research so well. So they're more doing the same thing.
They don't have time. That my dad worked his butt off, and he had all these magazines and journals, and he loved learning, but he didn't have time. He would just come home.
Right.
Doctors are in a really kind of a cruel situation right now with the whole medical system. It's very dysfunctional. So
you have online programs so people can work with you in varying forms, and let
yeah.
me know. I will definitely support you when you have something bigger coming up, or a YouTube
Okay.
channel. And
Sure. Yeah. And then on my website, there is a link, a booking link. If people are interested and they want to just learn more about me, I'll meet with you. It'll be me, like not someone that works for me, but if you want to meet, you know, we can have just like a little 30-minute conversation, see if it's a fit to work together. If it is, great. If not, it's totally fine too. You need to do what's best for you.
All right. Well, thank you so much. This was really amazing. I learned a whole lot, and it's just fascinating to me to hear more and more of how aligned, you know, when we all get together and we really believe that we can heal and help people to improve their lives, their, you know, their health, like the outlook on life, which is something that you're really big on, and I'm really big on that as well. So it's so empowering and so exciting for me. So thank you so much, Dr. Traci Potterf, to join us today, and goodbye, YouTube.